It is time to hop into the Pittsburgh Steelers black and gold DeLorean and go back to the past and talk about Pittsburgh Steelers football. Once again, my name is Bryan Anthony Davis. You can call me Bad. And my good friend Tone Deaf, one Tony Defeo, he is stopping in once again as we go back in time to talk about what shaped us as Pittsburgh Steelers fans. Tony, what is up?
What's up? Speaking of back in time, I figured you'd like this.
Yes, you got Magnum on DVD?
Yeah, I bought it about 6-7 years ago at a store. I don't know if we're allowed to say the names of stores.
I don't care.
Yeah, I bought it at a store. Walmart. I bought it at Walmart. It was like $10. I loved it.
Oh my gosh! You know what? I have all 8 seasons, and I bought them in like 2003, 2004 when they came out, and I paid like $40 a piece for each one. Yeah. And now with streaming services, like, oh, gosh.
I wish I could find it on streaming, but I can't.
Nope, I can't either. Have you watched the new Magnum? It's actually not bad, but it's not as good as that.
Oh, no. Yeah, but I love the new one, too. And I think that the new Higgins is the biggest badass on the show. I think that's pretty neat.
Yeah, but you can't be making out with Higgins.
That's a weird dynamic that they threw in there, but it's a reboot.
Yeah. I just don't know. I do not know. But with that, let's get into it. And we're seeing our friends Lance Williams in the show. Donald Nolan is here. Kathy Ford. And so Donald Nolan just said something that I was going to talk about. Tom Selleck was supposed to be Indiana Jones. Did you know that? I
did. Yeah, I saw the screen test that you can find it on YouTube. He screen tested. He was supposed to be the guy, but I guess CBS wouldn't let him out of his contract or let him do it for because I guess they had the first right of refusal.
Yeah, and guess what happened? There was a writer's strike, and he could have went, but it was too late. I mean, nobody's complaining about Harrison Ford. Harrison Ford was a great Indiana Jones, but you know what would have it been if it was Magnum? Tom Selleck is awesome. There you go. Big Bro Sco is here. He's saying me too. I don't know whether that's where he was born or if he's saying that he was supposed to be Indiana Jones as well. Big Bro Sco would have been a good Indiana Jones as well. So maybe they're talking about what Lance Williams was saying when I was born there, Tony, was McGee's Child Care Center. So there you go. And Oakland. Kathy Ford is asking Big Brosco about that as well. What's goody to my friend, Big Marv? He's calling us the Beastie Boys, and we're back live. And I like that, the Beastie Boys. We are the Ric Flair and Arn Anderson, your heels of BTSC. So there you go. And Big Brosco is saying, yes, he would have been an amazing Indiana Jones. He's backing that up. I would have loved it. If you were Han Solo, though, Rich, if you were the original Harrison Ford, then your brother could have been Chewbacca. There you go. Dave could have been Chewbacca. So that's something really interesting that I'm probably going to pay for in the future on that one. But so, hey, like we said at the last show, if you've come here for George Testin, you're killing me. Daryl Hall made John Oates. They're a team. They are a great team.
Speaking of heels.
So you're killing me. Everybody's, gosh, John Oates is a superstar that because he was the backup man, he's going to get this, just like Art Garfunkel. Art Garfunkel was so important to that group.
Right.
Simon Garfunkel. So was Kurt Smith. Who's Kurt Smith, you might ask? You know who Kurt Smith is?
No.
Okay.
I was just reaffirming your thing.
Tears for Fears. Kurt Smith and Roland Orzabal, and Roland Orzabal was your lead singer, but Kurt Smith was just as important, just as Andrew Ridgeley was to George Michael. But George Michael made it big. But you know what? he ended up with Siobhan Fahey, who was from Andrew Ridgely, the hot chick from I can't call her chick, the hot singer from Bananarama. So
okay, good for him.
So
Score.
Yeah, so score. I like that.
Yeah.
So
Wayne's World.
like we were talking, if you are here for new Pittsburgh Steelers news, we covered it on the last show. This is our journey back in time. Big Marv's a big Journey fan. How about that? I am teaching my kids Journey. Reed Overend is bringing up Everybody Wants to Rule the World. If you've never checked out the lyrics to Everybody Wants to Rule the World, and Lance Williams saying that he loved Tears for Fears, that is a great song. I love to quote that all the time. All for freedom and for pleasure. Nothing ever lasts forever. Everybody wants to rule the world. Steelers want to roll, and Steeler fans roll the world of football, as far as I'm concerned. And I want to bring up, I want to say big ups to we were talking about Magnum earlier. And what do you call our good friend Snowman?
Robin Masters.
Robin Masters.
Yes.
So I got I got an email from our very own Robin Masters, one Snowman, who I actually know his real name now. And I'm not going to disclose it because we can't do that. But so Snowman said to me, Bad, for the next retro show, what you should do is talk about how you became a Steeler fan. And that's something that we've talked about in the past. And we're going to do it again here, though. We're definitely going to do that again here. But I want to shape it a little differently. We're all Steeler fans. We all became Steeler fans for a different reason. Like I told the story on Father's Day, how my dad brought me into my Steeler fanhood and how it was always a bonding between us. And we still have that till this very day. But here's the thing. Whoever brings you into it, that's one story. That's how you became a fan. But there's a certain team that makes you a diehard, takes you from a casual fan to a diehard when you watch that season and you're like, all right, I'm in. Now, Lance is saying at birth, hey, my kids have had terrible towels wrapped around them and they weren't even 10 minutes old yet. Both of my kids. I made the hospital, and I'm not joking you. I made the hospital take 2 official birth pictures because they had to be wrapped in terrible towels. My wife's like, you really going to do that? I'm like, you're darn right I'm going to. So that to me is, that's how you become a fan. My kids became fans at birth, whether they want to be or not. I always made this joke. My son can be anybody he wants to be. If he tells me something that is disappointing to me, that's fine because I love him more than anything. But if he comes in and says, Dad, I need to talk to you, I've decided I'm a Baltimore Ravens fan. It's don't let the door hit you where the good Lord splits you, my friend, out. So that's the thing there. But there's certain teams that did it for you, that you're fans, but ones that you'll never forget. And my favorite Pittsburgh Steeler team that really turned me from a fan to a diehard was a 9-7 team. And it's none other than the 1984 Pittsburgh Steelers, because that was the perfect time for me. I was 12 years old, going on 13. I contend that your 12-year-old year is one of the greatest years of your life because you're getting ready to be a teen. You're still a kid. You saw it if you're a fan of the show Stranger Things. They start off at 12 in the very year that you and I were 12, Tony. In 1983, they're 12 years old, and it's just they're right there. They're right there between the two. And I love that 1984 team because you and I have talked about the Raiders game at the very end of the season. We've talked about that Denver game. We talked about that game against the 49ers when the 49ers ended up 18-1 that season and they beat them. and I could remember what I was wearing. I just got off of a football game for the American Outfitters Eagles, and I came home, and actually I went to my parents had a store at the time, and I was in the office watching it on a black and white TV. And Gary Anderson hits that field goal, and it was glorious. You know, I mean, you're like, this team just beat the 49ers.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's you have those teams that spark you. So I want to ask you, Tony, I mean, we grew up, you know, in the landscape of the steel curtain in the 1970s. Was it one of those teams that did it for you, or was it a different team?
Well, I mean, 1984 was a great year, and that's one I'll never forget, but I don't remember any of the 70s. I remember the Super Bowl 14. That's the first game I remember watching. That was the 79 season, of course. But what did it for me was the year after, 1980. And the reason why is you hear all these stories, and you know, like I knew that they had won 4 out of 6, and I just expected it to keep going. And it looked like it was going to keep going. It was the exact same team that was in the late 70s, early 70s, all the stars, but they kept losing these. I'll never forget the loss to the Bengals at Three Rivers Stadium, the loss to the Raiders on Monday Night Football. They blew a big lead in Cleveland. I mean, these were 3 losses that I still remember to this day, and they wound up missing the playoffs at 9-7. And my first full year of watching them, I expected them to win a Super Bowl, and they didn't even make the playoffs. And I just became it humbled me in one sense, and it made me hungry for it to happen, to see it happen after that. And I just kept chasing it as a fan for many years after that. So for me, it was 1980.
That's awesome. So that was the team for you. That
made me a diehard fan. I was crying.
You still had those 70s teams.
Right.
But, okay, that's really cool. So Ezra says, growing up in New York City, being a Steeler fan was tough. Well, how did you become a Steeler fan then, Ezra? And what was the team that did it for you? I'd like to hear that. Big Bro Sco. Got 4 TV channels all out of the Berg. All games were Steelers. And that's, that's something that'll do it for you too. That's, we don't realize right now that back in the day, you did not have alternatives. Everybody watched the Super Bowl. There were no puppy bowls. There were no Lifetime original movies. There was nothing that was going up against that. At one point, everybody was watching the Super Bowl because you really had no choice. If you want to watch whatever the other 2 networks, and when I say 2 networks, Fox didn't come out until 87.
Right.
Or late 86, I'm sorry. But you didn't have Fox. They didn't get football until 1994. If you wanted to watch PBS and Masterpiece Theater, sure. But I'm sorry for you. You were watching the Super Bowl. You were watching that stuff. Kathy Ford says this: spending time with my dad through later years of his life, then Hines Ward. Love that guy. So that's what turned Kathy. That's awesome.
Right.
Lance, Lance has told me this before. I'm sorry, Tony.
Oh no, I thought you were talking about that was my answer to Lance. He wanted to know what hospital I was born in. I didn't want to interrupt. I didn't want to interrupt.
Lance had a cousin that was a Raiders fan. When they played the Raiders, they kicked him out of the house and gave him a plate of food. Oh my goodness! Wow, that's amazing. Wes Hickok, great friend of the show. I started watching football in the early 90s. I loved the smash mouth style of Pittsburgh, and it was my home state team. I mean, I thought the Eagles sucked, LOL, but man, Hines Ward and Slash. And you know what I got to tell you, when you had Slash Stewart and then Bettis coming in at the same time, and then Hines a couple years later, that was special.
Yeah, and I think Wes became a fan at a great time because you mentioned what made me a fan in 1980 is when I became a diehard fan. The year before I could have cared less, and then Super Bowl 14 in 1980, and yet it was the worst timing because the entire 80s. I mean, they had some decent years. You mentioned 84. I'll never forget that year as long as I live. I still can't believe they won that game against the Broncos, but they were pretty mediocre, right? And they struggled. And then Bill Cowher came along in 92, and it just felt like what the 70s must have felt like. It's how Three River Stadium felt in 1992, how engaged the fans were. And it didn't seem like they were that way all throughout the 80s. And people talk about that first Oilers game in the Astrodome that year, but not that game later in the year when Al Del Greco missed that field goal and fans were dancing on a dugout at Three River Stadium. And my grandmother was like, look at the fans. Like she was going nuts. It just felt like it felt like the Steelers were a Super Bowl contender once again. And for the first time in my time watching them.
So I was born in December of 1971. So, when you look at it, in 1980, we just went through 4 Super Bowls, and I'm like you. I paid attention to 1978 and 1979, but I wasn't diehard yet.
Right.
It was a family thing, but and I was really into it, and football cards and football sticker books is what got me into it, and that's what made me a smart football fan, because that's how I knew who guys from other teams were.
Right.
And I remember the first time I got this book, and I'm like, I saw a picture of Matt Blair, great linebacker for the Minnesota Vikings.
Right.
And, this is an African-American gentleman. And I look at this guy, and I'm like, wait a second, that's not Matt Barr. And that's the only thing I'm thinking, because I just knew Matt Barr. I'm like, Matt Barr doesn't look like that. That's a completely different guy. But the 80s, there was something very romantic about being a Pittsburgh Steelers fan in the 1980s, because you mentioned it, Tony. You had to struggle through that.
Yes.
There were years of struggle, but you always threw in years of where they would come in, and there were Chuck Noll teams. There were years of hope too, where you're like, there's the old magic. 1984 was one of them. 1989 was another one of them.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Those 82 and 83 teams, I've been watching games from 82 and 83. Fantastic. They went through the throat for the throat.
Right.
And we talked about that the other day on the show, how that team would score a lot. And that strike team of 1982 they ended up the season 6-3, and really could have gone far in the playoffs that year. Mm-hmm. But they lost to Dan Fouts, who always had their number.
Yeah.
In the first round, but they very easily could have one more win, and they're the number 1 seed, and it's a different story.
Absolutely.
So, they could have beaten a team like the Dolphins that year. The Dolphins beat the Jets to go play the Redskins. So that's, it's funny how that could have actually happened.
Yeah, because that offense, I've gone back and watched some of those 80 through 82 games with Bradshaw, and the offense was so basically together, but the defense had gotten old, and a lot of guys started to retire. But that offense was still really potent from 80 through 82. They just didn't have they had a lot of turnovers. They turned the ball over a lot, but they also had the defense just wasn't the same by that point.
So I'm going to try to read as much as these as I possibly can, Tony. But what I want to ask, I want a specific year that you remember that turned it for you. George Testin kind of gives us one. My grandparents were the first ones in the family to have a color TV. Black and gold were the same colors as my high school team, 1969. So George remembers 1969, and and great year, even though they were 1-13 that year. But you kind of knew something was changing when you're bringing in the number 4 draft pick overall in Joe Green. And then you're coming in with Chuck Noll, and the Chuck Noll era started. Ezra, New York City, you mentioned before. Mean Joe Green, that commercial turned me. I wish I was that kid, black and gold sense. There was a TV movie in 1980. It premiered after the Steelers-Falcons game on the NBC Sunday Night Movie of the Week. It was Mean Joe and the Coca-Cola Kid or something like that.
I remember watching that.
I remember watching it.
Yeah.
Wonder if you could find that. Go ahead, Tony.
They were obviously they were trying to piggyback off of the Fighting Back one starring Robert York about Rocky Bleier. I think that's what that was. That was kind of
I'm going to disagree with you. I actually think that came out. If I'm correct that it was 1980 when that came out, the Rocky Bleier movie was like late November, early December of 1980.
Oh, okay.
So we might need to check that. I think that came a little bit earlier, but I think it was a dumb movie, but it was still fun. And
right.
Now I got to look for that on YouTube. You could find Fighting Back on YouTube.
Oh yeah, I've watched it. Yeah.
Let's see if we could find the Coca-Cola Kid on there. I mean, that would be worth it. For me, it was like, remember back in the day, a Gary Coleman movie would come out on the NBC Saturday night or Friday night movie of the week. Those them to me. I loved them.
Yeah, me too.
Wes says, the Steelers to me are one of the few teams that feel completely engraved into a community in every way. It takes a special passion to love them, but nothing could make us turn our back on them. Right. That's why we're talking about, we have all these people in the live chat talking about it right now, because it's a part of your foundation and special. Right. Dave Shipley says, bad. You remember Pay Dirt with the little records. Lance? Yes. That of Lance too. I don't remember that.
No, you know that? No. Well, I mean, we're all around the same age. I was born in 72, but that's the first time I've ever heard of that one.
Bry 160701 says we should have kept Bono. Actually, it's Bono, not Sonny Bono, not Bono, not Sir Bono from U2. But I just watched a game with Mr. Bono and wearing number 13. It was Steve, right?
Steve Bono. He was a replacement quarterback in 87.
I watched those guys. Gosh, I watched the one against the Rams. Those replacement games. They I got through the whole thing, but it was tough. But it was really interesting. It was really interesting to watch. That would have been. Wonder what he would have done with that team, because he ended up having a good career with the 49ers. Lance Williams said we didn't play that, be the Steeler fan or suffer bodily harm. That's back on the on his Raiders cousin. We have Robin Masters. We were talking about him before. Our very good friend Snowman, who helped inspire this show today. And thank you. I appreciate that. The Steelers 7-8-33. Jack Lambert 7-8-52. Snowman 7-8-65.
Well,
that's why I was born a Steelers fan. Okay, it took me a while to figure that out. I was thinking, so in 1933, Snowman, you figured it out. I love that. 7-8. There you go.
So there's a chance that he could be Jack Lambert, Snowman. We'll never know, because Jack Lambert's really mysterious, and I think it's his first clue right there. He's trying to reveal who he is. It might be Jack Lambert. Wouldn't that be crazy?
That's funny. George Testin says, a few weeks ago, I watched the game from 1980, Steelers versus the Oilers. Did you know Terry Bradshaw's brother, Craig Bradshaw, was a 7th round pick quarterback for the Oilers? I actually knew that.
No, I didn't know that.
He didn't do too much. Here's an interesting thing. I think he would have still been around in 1982, and like Pastorini was gone, because they brought Pastorini in from the Raiders, and then they ended up in 1982. I remember watching a game, the Oilers and the Steelers, and who do you think was the Oilers quarterback against the Steelers in that game? I'll never forget it.
The Snake?
It was not the Snake. The Snake ended up there, but it wasn't the Snake.
In 1982.
Yeah. This is out of left field. He's a legend. Probably a legendary father.
Oh, yes, of course. Archie Manning. Yeah, he went there when they were absolutely awful. He said, you traded me finally you finally traded me, but you traded me to a team that's worse than that I already played on. Yeah.
Christian Cahill, born in 90. First game I ever watched was Steelers Cowboys Super Bowl. Also, very first moment I can remember with my dad. Been hooked since. That is a great. Thank you, Christian. That's a great memory. And you know what? That's a game that shaped a lot of Steelers fans. And there's a lot of Steeler fans that actually have good. I have good memories of that game. And it was actually, they lost. Yes,
Yeah.
But I have great memories of that because they were finally there. It was breaking a drought, and they could have won that game. I know what happened, but it was my first Super Bowl as an adult.
Right.
And I was only about 23 years old. But it was something that was just so awesome to me. And
I'll never forget it.
It just felt like you felt alive. And even though they lost that game, you held your head high.
Honestly, the 2 weeks leading up to that Super Bowl, when they finally beat the Colts, they beat the Colts, and I knew they were finally going to go. The 2 weeks that led up to that Super Bowl were some of my favorite times as a sports fan in my entire life to this day. So I'm like you, they lost, but I never thought I'd see them make it there, and they finally made it there, and it was such because of how the 80s went, and then so many close calls in the 90s, in the early 90s with Cowher. When they finally made it, I just soaked up every second of it, and I'll never forget that time period as long as I live.
Absolutely. I even watched the Super Bowl 45 the other day, and one of the reasons I watched that game is because you and I had a show on Marquise Pouncey, and I asked you the question: if Marquise Pouncey plays in that game, could they possibly win that game? And you said yes. And I watched that one play over and over when Legursky and the lineman ran over, and Ben throws that pick six. And I actually watched the last sequence too. They had opportunities to win that game too. But I don't have as great memories of that one as I do as far as the losses go. That's I don't want to say a special loss. No loss is special. And I know I'm going to get beat up. I'm not down that far because I'm looking for fandom stuff. But that one Super Bowl against the Cowboys, that made a lot of Steeler fans. Big Marv, 34. I was introduced to Steelers at the age of 8. Watching them made me want to go play, and that's when I started playing football. That's awesome.
He said,
I need a year on that, Big Marv.
He said he was born in '66, so that means he became a fan during their first Super Bowl. That's
Big Marv said 66. I thought it was Snowman. Snowman said 65.
Maybe I was wrong, but I thought he said 66. But either way, it's still a good time. I think it's when most kids get into sports 7 or 8 years old.
Ryan O'Toole says Steelers have always been a classy organization, and now as an adult, that is cool because not all owners and organizations are like that. They are still a classy organization, and I agree. And that's what. You know what? That's another thing. I remember as a kid watching how old Art Rooney was, and he'd do that United Way commercial, and all these kids would flock to him, sit on his lap, and they'd all want to be around Art. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that man is so old. And he was the same age as my grandfather. And all I could think of was, what's going to happen when this man dies? And he's old, and I was afraid that he was going to die because I was just, you're a kid. You worry about those things. And you think of different things. And he felt like family to you. Art Sr. felt like family. Dan felt like family. It's just like, that's the thing. I equate Steelers to family all the time, and we're getting some stories like that as well. Andre Coleman, who is not number 19, Andre Coleman, that played for Hickory. We had an Andre Coleman on the Steelers for a year or two. My mom, my older sister, and my uncle are from Pittsburgh. Jeremy Tooman and I were born and raised in Liberal, Kansas. That made me a Steelers fan. How about that? Jeremy Tooman.
That's great.
Born in Liberal, Kansas with Andre Coleman. That's great. And thanks for the $5. And I need to thank Snowman. I quoted Snowman, but I didn't thank him. And thank you, Andre. And we really appreciate that. Anybody with the super chat, we really appreciate you. We appreciate all of you, actually. So thank you very much. I did lose my place there, Tony, but it's really cool to hear all these things. But once again, please throw in your year, the year that you realized that you were a big Steelers fan. So Snowman says that Jack Lambert is his all-time favorite Steeler, and I guess that would be the thing. Christian Cahill, and I love this. He was talking earlier about being born in 1990 in that Super Bowl. So he was about 5.5. That Super Bowl, I learned a few new cuss words, and Dad let me throw his bad call foam brick at the TV. Do you remember those bad call bricks?
I do. Yeah, I think we might have had some in my house. I can't remember.
I could see you having a bad call brick, Tony.
Well, I definitely needed it. I can tell you that much. Especially not Super Bowl, but growing up as a kid, I definitely needed a bad call brick.
I had a buddy that dated, that was dating a woman, and she wanted to learn more about what he loves, and he's like, you need to watch you want to watch some Steelers with me, and it was the off season. He said, I tell you what, I've got the perfect game. It's Steelers versus Colts, 2005. Well, actually January 14th, January 15th of 2006. So she's watching the game, and Mr. Morelli makes that horrible call on Troy Polamalu, the interception that wasn't. She looks at him and says, "Oh my God, that's my high school principal." And he was and she's from California, and that was her high school principal. And it was just funny that, that's you think about something like that, and she's watching a completely different thing because she sees the guy that everybody hates at this moment.
Right.
And that's the guy that she loved in school.
Yes. To this day, I'll never understand why that was overturned. It defied all just all logic.
No one will, Tony. No one ever will.
Right.
And Dave Schofield has a theory. He has a theory that, we just talked about this the other day again, too. The Jesse James call and everything. A lot of calls like that. If there's an iffy call and the game is kind of out of reach at the point of the iffy call, he thinks that iffy call is going to the other team so the NFL could have a closer game. It's a conspiracy theory, but it makes sense, and it definitely worked in that. I'm not going to rail on it. But that's definitely an interesting thing, and maybe that was what happened in that game, because that was an absurd call.
Well, think about it. If he would have just stayed there on the ground, it would have been an interception. But because he tried to do more,
he's Troy. Yeah, he's Troy.
But that's my point. Is he actually extended the play by getting up. So obviously he had to have possession of the ball longer, and they called it an incomplete pass. It just didn't make any sense.
That was just ridiculous. I mean, I'm sitting there. I'm like, okay, why are they taking all the time on this? This is not. You can't overturn this. And I just sat there dumbfounded.
Right.
How are they overturning this? But if you're wondering what the Steeler Retro Show is all about, it's just talking about stuff like this that sparks your memory and fun stuff. Now, speaking of the Colts, let's go 10 years earlier. 95 championship against the Colts made me realize we were a Steelers family. Senor Slim. And Senor Slim, I mentioned this a couple of weeks back. I was in West Virginia, and I had just moved, from moving from Pennsylvania, moving from Johnstown, I was away from the house and the family for the first time, and probably the first AFC championship game I'm watching without my family. And my friends got champagne, and they poured it over my head. Oh. And like I said, it burnt like crazy. That champagne burns your eyes, but it felt so good. It felt so good. I mean, it was the best feeling.
I did a belly flop after that. First of all, for a split second there, I had my whole life flash before my eyes, because I think it was Phil Simms or Paul McGuire screamed, "He caught it!" Whenever that.
Yep, he did. He did say that.
So I had 94 against the Chargers flashing before my eyes. I had the 92 NLCS with the Pirates. That was the most heartbreaking loss of my life. That I said, it's never going to happen. Then of course they said incomplete. There was no replay. So I went
crazy.
Yeah, and I went and slid in my grandmother's kitchen on my belly. I was 23, so I didn't hurt myself. And I looked up, and my Uncle Tony, my late Uncle Tony, he was a big fan. He was my godfather and everything. He was a big fan. For some reason, to this day, I'll never know why. He was in the kitchen cooking something on his stove. I don't know if he just couldn't take the pressure or what. But he looked down at me and he said, "Grow up." And he had a point. He had a good point.
You know what? I don't want to disagree with your late Uncle Tony, your late great Uncle Tony, but here's the thing. You know what? Football makes us kids.
Yeah.
It's a release. I mean, fandom makes us kids again.
Right.
Wes says the AFC Championship game versus Jim Harbaugh was the game that did it for me as well. I love this. I swear Bryan 160701 he's a relative of mine somehow. He might be my lost brother because he brings up guys like Rich Ehrenberg and guys like that my 80s guys, and it seems like we're kind of separated at birth somewhere, but he remembers when Rich Ehrenberg outrushed Eric Dickerson. How about that? Yeah. That's what a great story that is.
That was the year he rushed for 21. He set the single season rushing record, so that was a mean feat for the Steelers to shut him down, Eric Dickerson, in that game.
Absolutely. How cool was that?
Yeah.
Ezra says my favorite Steeler memory, Antonio Holmes tippy toe in the end zone and the Vanderjagt mix. You could not. Yeah, you can't say anything on that. I love this. Dave Shipley, when Thomas Everett knocked out Altoon and Lloyd counted him out. My second favorite. Greg Lloyd. That's the day Greg Lloyd became one bad apple in my eye. That's when I realized I always liked him. But that's when he turned from Steeler player to superstar in my eye. That was the moment when he knocked him out. And I was watching the game with my good friend Jimmy DiMartino. And we had Jim's brother Ed on when we had the fellow from Richland High School football. We had on the show back in April. And I was at Jim's house, and this was 89 when this happened. And I remember Jimmy being so mad. He was so ticked off that he did that. He's like, Greg Lloyd's a punk, Greg, and all this. And I'm like, this is awesome. I love Greg Lloyd.
The funny thing about that, I loved it too. I thought it was me and my uncle, who were the same age, my uncle Eugene, we loved it. But could you imagine if that happened today? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's you know what? I thought it was Pat Ryan. I mean, he had there was two big things that Lloyd did in that game. I thought it was Pat Ryan that he the quarterback that he counted out.
No, it was Altoon.
But it was Altoon. He did something. He did something to Lloyd. Did something to Pat Ryan in that game as well. Ezra brings up his worst memory. Gary Plummer. I'm not bringing it up on the screen. I can't even bring that up on the screen. Gary Plummer, Chargers. You brought it up earlier. We can't do that, but I get it.
Yeah, that was horrible.
Big Marv says yes, 1966. Dave Shipley or Dalton Hall button the guard. Here's something interesting. Dalton Hall. Do you remember Dalton from Clemson?
I do, yeah.
What's his claim to fame for the Steelers?
I don't know his claim to fame, but I know he drew a lot of penalties for
He was pretty good his rookie year. In fact, he was Steelers Rookie of the Year. He was a number 2 draft pick out of Clemson, a cornerback. And they also took a cornerback with their first pick, Rod Woodson.
Right.
Dalton Hall beat out Rod Woodson for Rookie of the Year. Now, I know Rod Woodson held out, but still, he beat him out.
Yeah,
that was pretty impressive.
I remember him having a really good start to his career, and then he kind of just went away. I don't know whatever happened to him.
Now I'm seeing a lot of the worst here too. A lot of people bringing up the worst. That's really tough for me. I will bring them up, but it's tough for me because I'm more in celebration mode.
Right
here. But I will just do that. Zach McClintock says my two favorite amigos. I was at the 84 Steeler game, my first and only game. And I brought my portable TV, 8D cell batteries, black and white, 4.5-inch screen. That's amazing. You know what? Which 84 game? I went to a game in 84. I went to an Oilers game, but that's really cool. I love it.
They beat it was like 35-7 or something. That they really like Mark Malone beat them up.
Early November. Yeah. Like it was November 3rd or something. Ezra, I was born in 72, but my first logical thought was in 1980. That's kind of me and Tony here. There you go. This is so fun to go back in time and do this. Kathy Ford says, my dad knew Art Rooney. Dad was a pilot and flew him to and fro games. A few games. How awesome is that?
Yeah, that is great stuff.
Reed says, Neil drops back, 4-man rush, has got to throw it deep. Man open down there. It's caught at the 3-yard line and out at the 1. What a great grab by Ernie Mills. First and goal, Steelers at the Colts 1. I think he's quoting Bill Hillgrove. I could hear Bill saying all of that.
Right. And Myron Cope butting in, but God.
You know what? The thing about that, Reed brings that up. One of my favorites is from the Super Bowl. And I think I had this bottle opener after the Super Bowl in 2006, where you would open a bottle and it would play Bill Hillgrove clips from that Super Bowl. And I just remember him going, it's a Steeler maniac haven.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes. See, that's what does it. I mean, this is stuff we have great memory. We're blessed to be Steelers fans, even if there's a drought. And go ahead.
I just glanced over at Dave Shipley at the Flive Jets, and I missed your Oilers, and that's the truth. You missed, even though they were the enemies and they're still here, they're the Titans, but you missed those rivals. Like, you have more respect for those guys now when you're watching them. Like, I have more respect for Warren Moon and Boomer Esiason and those guys, because they used to torture the Steelers. But now that I look back on them with more objectivity. They were great players, and they were just great memories.
So before I bring this next one up, you get married and, everybody gives you wedding gifts. And my buddy Matt from Pittsburgh, Chartiers Valley grad, and my buddy Matt, he came to my wedding. And this was my second wedding. This was not the starter marriage. This was the one this was the one that I'm still married to her 13 years later today, the love of my life. So everybody, people bring, what do they bring? They maybe glass sets, cutlery, whatever for your wedding. He brings me a football. And it says, to Bryan and Jennifer, congratulations, best wishes, Franco Harris.
Wow.
So the reason I bring that up, it's a prized possession. It got damaged in a flood, but it's still in pretty good shape. Big Marv says this, I got an autograph from Franco Harris, but sadly to say I lost an autograph to a fire in 2018, and boy, was I hurt. We got to find Big Marv. Marv, what was it on? Was it just a piece of paper? Was it a card? Was it a picture? We got to find Big Marv a replacement autograph for that. That's I don't know if we can, but let's if you run into Franco, get one for Big Marv. We need to replace that. So many great comments here about different things in the fanhood. And when you're watching a game in the 2020 season, you're watching a game because of what's going on now. You know what I mean? What was going on way back then. So that's kind of why you become a fan, because there's certain years that do it for you. Mine was 84, and you said yours was 1980. Some could talk about that 1989 team that did it for them. Some could talk about an obscure team. Somebody could talk about a team from 2002, not an obscure team, but the Tommy Maddox year that they didn't win at all. But there's some special memories surrounding that team and maybe family, maybe. I mean, of course, they won the Super Bowl in 2006, and I've told the story about so many times on this show about how I took my the woman that I was dating for about a month to the January 1st game against the Detroit Lions. Bettis, 3 touchdowns after the third one. That famous picture when he's holding the helmet in the air. The fans are yelling, one more year.
Mm-hmm.
And I look over and she's crying, and I was dating her a month and she never watched football in her life. Her family is like, you're going to a football game? She was watching games to get more so she could talk to me about it when I wasn't there. Mm-hmm. I look over, she's crying, and I'm like, this is the woman I'm going to marry. And
that's right.
I'm going to be with her because she was crying about something that I cared about.
There you go.
And it touched her. I'm like, I want her to have my children.
That's a keeper.
Snowman says 1980 was the year I bought my first football magazine and found out the Steelers had the same birthday as me. And then in 1982, I found out Jack Lambert was born the same day as me. That's fate. That's really awesome.
Right.
We need to find out birthdays at another time and match you with Steelers. That'd be a lot of fun. Maybe the Stat Geeks could do that.
There you go. There you go. I like that. That's a good topic.
So, Ezra says this. Ezra's a Yankees fan. As much as I love my Yankees, I'll trade any one of our World Series championships for a Steeler playoff win. Love it. I mean,
I would too. I would too as a Pirates fan. I'd trade all the Yankees World Series titles. No offense, Ezra.
Okay, here's a question. Let me ask you this. Would you trade a Penguins champion, one of the Penguins championships, or a Steelers championship for the Pirates? Because the drought's on 41 years.
I would. I mean, I'm not a huge Penguins fan, so yeah, I definitely trade one of the Stanley Cups for a World Series. I just want to see him make it. I just want to see him make it. Yeah.
Let's talk Steelers then. Would you trade one of the 6 for the Steelers for the Pirates to win one?
I know
if you had that power.
I think I would, because I'm almost convinced I'm never going to see it. I just want to see him make it. I just want to see him make it to a World Series. So yeah, the small market baseball teams have it tough. The Pirates. You could talk about the owner being cheap, and he is, but somebody had to be the cheapest small market owner. The problem with baseball is there's small market teams, and they're always going to be at a disadvantage. So I would definitely do that.
So here's something interesting. Ezra says my first Steeler game was 2015 playoff against the Bungles when Jeremy Hill fumbled. I lost my blank. And then he says this. Dave Shipley mentioned something earlier, and I guess it was about 9/11 postponing the opening of Heinz Field. It broke his heart. I was on the other end of that. Of course, don't want those games to be postponed, but I was at the first. I had the tickets to the Bengals game, so I was at the first regular season game at Heinz Field because of that. I would gladly trade that experience to have 9/11 never happening.
Right.
But I ended up going to the game because of that. And like I said, I wish I didn't. I wish I was at the second.
Right.
Senor Slim says, I realized upon watching Super Bowl 40 replay was last play of the game. The Seahawks threw to the tight end who was talking smack, Jeremy Stevens, and he gets lit up, and Fair is making sure he knows it. I love that. It's the personality of the players that do it for you too.
Right.
Jovman disagrees with you, and he says never. Bob Nutting doesn't deserve that. You know, I used to work for the Nutting family. I never met Bob, but I met some Nuttings. Dave Shipley says, Tony, hard baseball doesn't suck. The game is awesome.
I never said it did.
I was more. No, you did it.
Yeah.
And then Darren Dalton says, oh man, I'm super late today. You can check it out on any of our family of podcasts. Then Jovman wants, I'm just going to put this up. I'm not going to repeat it, but he's hoping to trade Bob Nutting for a big Marv autograph.
I got news for you, Jovman. It wouldn't help anything, no matter who became the owner. So there's a salary cap, not to get on a rant, but it would not help.
Mark Cuban? You don't think Mark Cuban?
He might be able to do it for a year or two, but owners don't want to spend their own money long term, and that's what he would have to do. They want to spend the revenue that they generate, and you can't generate the same kind of revenue in Pittsburgh as you can in LA or New York because of the TV contracts.
And that year was 2001, Big Marv says, and I got that autograph. Steelers versus Ravens. The Steelers lost that game. I was at that game too. That's the one when they missed I mean, the Ravens kicked 5 field goals and won 15-14 or something like that. I mean, with the last minute, I'll never forget that.
Chris, what's his name? Chris, I forget his last name, but he missed all those field goals that game.
Chris
Brown? That game?
You know what? Because Jeff Reed didn't come until 2002.
Yeah. Chris
Brown was a rookie in 2000, and I guess 2001 was when he missed a bunch of field goals. So yeah, I'm not sure. But there are people disagreeing with you. They're not giving up a Steelers one, but they will. They would give up a Penguins championship to give the Steelers a 7th championship. I probably would too. Those Penguin games were special to me, but I'm Steelers first. And I was mentioning about baseball. There was a time that I think I was in the early 80s. I was probably a bigger Pirates fan than I was a Steelers fan.
Right.
And because then that 1984 season kind of switched it for me. I was a huge Steelers fan, but that's when it all changed. So that's what we were going for today, and we had a lot of fun doing it. That's what the Steelers Retro Show is all about. Thank you, all of you, for coming in and talking about your memories, being a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. Remember, on the last show and on the Q&A and every other Pittsburgh Steeler Behind the Steel Curtain podcast, you're going to hear stories about what's happening now, what's going to happen in the future. But it's always good to go back in the past. And that's what we do here, Tony. And Tony, we cannot do it with these people. These people are a BTSC family, and I adore each and every one of you. Thank you for hanging out with us today. Tony, any last thoughts?
I had a great time today. It was fun. I loved it. I love both shows, but I love this one. I love talking about the past. I love when you, to me, sports is all about, it reminds you of your growing up, it reminds you of your family, it reminds you of watching games with people that you love growing up. So yeah, I love it.
I do too, and I'm always going to want to talk about the current Pittsburgh Steelers, and that's what we do. But it's so great to go in the past, get in that DeLorean. And speaking of that DeLorean, that's going to lead us out. So for Tony Defeo, my name is Bryan Anthony Davis. You could call me Bad. And I just want to say, take me away. I don't mind, but you better promise me
you'll be back in time.
We'll see you next week. Love you.